we have with us Dr. Robinson. Dr. Robinson holds a Ph.D. in industrial organizational psychology and an MS in organizational and clinical psychology from Alliant International University and a BA in psychology from Wagner College. Her expertise includes human resources, corporate social responsibility, and organizational behavior. She has researched workplace dynamics and service as an adjunct faculty member, focusing on psychology, research methods, and curriculum development. And she is here presenting with us the recent decline of corporate focus on DEIA and CSR efforts. You have the floor, Dr. Robinson.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you all for joining this evening. Super excited to chat with you about this topic. It's a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and something that I will be looking into and really hoping to focus some research on in the coming year as part of the Faculty Fellow program here at Westcliff. So I'm excited that to share with you my initial proposal for kind of phase one of the research that I'm hoping to do. And I assume you all can see my screen, but someone can give me a thumbs up. Okay. All right, awesome. Perfect. So I won't go through the introduction. So since Dr. Gray already did a wonderful job of sharing a little bit about my background, I love that we have some IO psych fans in the audience. There's not many of us out there, so I always love when people even know what IO stands for. I just wanted to start the presentation out with a quote from Richard Branson, whom I'm sure you're all familiar with, is co-founder of the Virgin Group. So a wide variety of businesses that have been very, very successful, from air travel to music to a host of other businesses. And has also been really an individual that has been instrumental in the movement around corporate social responsibility. So his quote, "Doing good is good for business," kind of reflects the idea that we're going to be talking about today, is that social responsibility can be key to business success. And that by kind of investing in these types of positive actions as corporations, whether it's sustainability, corporate social responsibility, volunteerism, employee wellness, these are all things that can really, not only impact a brand's reputation, but certainly have been shown by research to drive customer loyalty, improve employee satisfaction, which, all of those things can directly lead to long-term growth and profitability for a business. And so within this quote too, Branson also kind of implies that businesses have multi-purposes, right? It's easy, particularly, I think, in a capitalistic market like the US, to think about businesses' sole purposes driving profitability, driving financial growth. But there's been an emerging trend that really corporations have a triple bottom line, right? So not just to the financials, but to the communities they serve, to the employees that work for these organizations, and thus can pursue multiple paths of success, and in a way that can also contribute to that financial success. So a couple of years ago, customers and investors were more likely to support companies that really demonstrated their commitment to social environmental issues, and really kind of grabbing onto this concept that doing good as a business can be a compelling advantage in the marketplace. And really leading to things like customer engagement, better financial performance, and so forth. And again, we saw this trend of emerging kind of conscious capitalism, where businesses were really encouraged to take on a broader role in society, and not just focusing on short-term profitability or business continuity, but really looking at long-term sustainability and a broader view of value creation. So beyond just value creation for shareholders, but really looking at value creation as a broader concept for all stakeholders that are in the ecosystem of the business. However, what we've seen, really starting as an emerging trend, late 2022 and into 2023, and certainly more so in this year, is that the acceptance of these kind of ideas really have started to receive some pushback and challenges. And we'll talk a little bit about that throughout the presentation and really kind of the way in which I want to go about exploring this new trend. So what we'll talk about today is I'll give a little bit of background for those of you who are new to corporate social responsibility. We'll talk a little bit about ESG and how these concepts really emerged really since the turn of this century. We'll talk about kind of the current environment around corporate social responsibility, both from a perspective of sustainability as well as DEIA. I'll talk a little bit about the proposed research that I'm going to be pursuing over the balance of the year. So a lot of when we talk about kind of this broader idea of environmental, social, and corporate governance, the ESG movement, at least in the public sector, a lot of it really originated from some of the work the UN did around kind of principles of responsible investment. So this is back in 2006. Which really focused on driving, this idea that corporations shouldn't necessarily be solely, focused on profitability, but really looking at broader-based metrics. We saw in 2016, the UN released their sustainability goals. And the UN Sustainable Development Goals really are a set of kind of these 17 global objectives that were established to really address the urgent environmental, social, and economic challenges that are currently being faced around the world, with the idea that by establishing the right partnerships between corporate organizations, NGOs, and governments around the world, that we could make meaningful progress against these challenges by the year 2030. So things like aiming to end poverty, protecting the planet, promoting income equality, all of these things, quality education, gender equality, these were all things that are encompassed in these 17 global objectives. And really the work of the UN was then to take the Sustainable Development Goals and really encourage countries, again, to partner with their NGOs, non-government organizations, with corporations to really make progress towards these goals. And so if you see a lot of organizations that have commitments to net zero emissions by 2030, this is really the framework that they're aligning to when they make those statements. What we saw coming out of the establishment of these goals was a series of corporations really leaning in to these types of net 30 statements. And so one of the examples I'll highlight was BlackRock, which is a investment group, really that leaned in heavily to say that by 2030, they wanted to take the bulk of their corporate and sovereign assets, so their investments that they managed on behalf of clients, and move them towards companies that were really invested in reducing carbon emissions. So this was something that what at the time was very much supported by the broader base of customers and clients of BlackRock. So that's a little bit of the background in terms of where a lot of these kind of foundational movements came into really evolving with corporate social strategy. So fast forward to 2024, 2023, we really start to see a lot of pushback against these types of trends in organizations. And so I'm sharing just a few of the headlines from recent months where companies really either face direct backlash and financial penalty for pursuing these types of initiatives within their organization in a public manner, or where you see companies proactively dropping things like diversity initiatives, social responsibility initiatives, sustainability initiatives from their website. So kind of removing that public-facing view that they are engaged in these activities. And so on the prior slide, I was speaking to BlackRock. So one example where they received some backlash for their focus and movement towards sustainable investing was the Texas school pulled the management of their fund, which is an $8.5 billion asset from BlackRock's management. So huge loss of a customer group for BlackRock. So similarly, and one that I find interesting myself, having worked in HR the majority of my career, you have the Society of Human Resource Management, which is the leading professional organization for human resources professionals, eliminating the word equity from their diversity statements, which if you're ever interested in seeing how controversial comments can get, that's a great post to go look up on LinkedIn and review the response from the HR community on that decision. So, and there's some other examples here. You also see companies like Lowe's, Tractor Supply Company, Wayfair, really scaling back public initiatives around their social responsibility, and really facing a lot more pressure from certain types of activists in terms of how they position their corporate strategies. So what kind of changed? So, that was kind of my question, is really, what's changed in the environment that's causing some of this pressure on organizations to change course when it comes to their social responsibility goals? Again, many businesses pulling back on their DEIA statements, their environmental initiatives, and so forth. And it really comes down to, I would say, three main areas that seem to be the root cause of a lot of this pullback. So first and foremost, economic pressures. So with inflation as a big factor, uncertain economic conditions, a lot of companies have really moved into cost-cutting mode. That tends to lead to what is somewhat considered extraneous programs like diversity initiatives or ESG programs getting cut. So that certainly has played a factor in recent years around these programs. But also, certainly, there's a lot of political and legal challenges that have emerged, both with states and policymakers really criticizing a number of these types of initiatives as unnecessary or ineffective. There's been a lot more regulatory scrutiny. So we see decisions coming out of the Supreme Court around affirmative action. And ultimately, public companies really facing pressures from activist shareholders on both sides, right? Conservative and liberal, that really are trying to directly impact social responsibility efforts one way or another. And that's really an emerging trend that we haven't seen before. So a couple examples, you see companies like Meta and Zoom really reducing their spending, really as part of broader cost cutting, but also in a very public way. In 2023, more than 1/3 of states have passed anti-ESG laws, and you're seeing kind of an increase in lawsuits and legal challenges against ESG requirements and or DEIA efforts. And again, in 2023, attorneys generals from 13 states, again, moved to push on serious legal consequences for race-based preference in employment and contracting practices. So these are all areas that are putting pressure on these DEIA initiatives. I'm going to move through this next piece just a little bit quick because I know we're running out of time, but certainly the impact is from a corporation's perspective, corporations play such a significant role in climate change. Almost 70% of greenhouse gases can be impacted through corporations. Certainly if we look at economic disparities and really closing economic gaps, both US and internationally, these types of outsourcing cost-cutting initiatives generally make broader economic disparities rather than helping to close those gaps. We've certainly seen a decrease in volunteerism, so 7% in 2023 from the prior year. So it's leading to an actual decrease in that type of work in the community. Certainly weakening consumer trust. As I started with, a lot of the research previously showed that customer loyalty is really driven by these types of activities. So you see that weakening connection between consumers and their loyalty to organizations. And certainly a big part of ESG practices is ensuring that human rights, environmental rights, and so forth are protected in the supply chain. The lower emphasis on ESG also leads to a less ethical supply chain. So these are all the potential impacts and risks that we might see as we go out. And so
You have 1
Sorry.
minute remaining.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
So in terms of that challenge, right? So based on the research, DEIA, CSR still have critical roles to play in organization. Yes, some of the reasons for I mentioned before around customer sentiment and loyalty, the ability to attract and retain employees, all of which help the performance of the organization. However, research generally has been light in some of these areas, and really the idea of being able to based on current pushback from broader media outlets, political trends, and so forth. It was something that I ultimately really want to spend some time exploring in the coming year. And my first step in this research, as I'm proposing, is to really start with a qualitative study that's really looking at these trends from the perspective of the CSR and DEIA practitioners. So really doing in-depth interviews with them to understand their experience and their perspective on these trends from inside their organizations, targeting primarily in Orange County, which is a wealth of corporate from the spectrum of businesses from small to medium to large, a lot of Fortune 500 companies, but also a lot of privately owned companies. So we should be able to get a really nice sample size just right here in our own backyard of Westcliff. And then really seek to identify some of the factors that are leading to these trends that we can ultimately use to identify future avenues for research in this area. With that, these are my references that I'm happy to share, but I'm also happy to entertain any questions that anyone has.